Welcome to Entangled Health, where quantum tech, AI, health, biology, and consciousness research overlap.
Between us, just the two of us here, quantum computers are toys. And what I mean by that is that today, there's very little that you can do on a quantum computer that you cannot achieve classically.
Once per episode, a quantum algorithm running on real hardware picks one question from the listener community. Not random like a hat draw, quantum random. Because the universe, uncertainty is something to optimize away. It's where the good stuff lives. Building tension. So let me just open it. So it is done. Here it is. It's the machine just finished. It's IBM Torino this time. So I didn't even know I have access to this one, but it just picked number 8, and it's reading. And it's also really fitting to you. Which historical figure would you most like to interview about the future of science? Wow, that's a question for Dean. I'll let you think.
Well, part of me would want to talk to Isaac Newton, partially because I know that he had written more on alchemy than he had on his actual physics, and so like to explore what amounts to his metaphysics. But by the same token, people like Max Planck, you are an idealist, and yet you're working at the leading edge of physics. How are you thinking? How do you make this compatible? Where you're imagining that consciousness is the fundamental of everything, and yet you're revolutionizing physics. What does that feel like inside? So it would probably be those kinds of figures, people who had a metaphysical bent, and yet we're also advancing physics, because I see that in myself in some ways. That like from an intuitive sense. I am attracted to things like idealism, maybe not full-blown idealism, because I don't know how that would work, but dual aspect monism, other kinds of philosophies that would allow physics to be perfectly the same way that it is today, except it's a more comprehensive way of thinking about how things work. And so there's also a sociological reason for being interested in that. And that case can be made that as science moved more and more past the Enlightenment towards materialism as the only viable form of philosophy, along with that became nihilism. That nihilism became a philosophy, like a personal philosophy, that nothing matters, everything is pointless. And that is very destructive. So even if it turned out to be true, which I'm an agnostic on this, I don't know what's really true. But even if nihilism was a true philosophy, it's extremely destructive, because it means that people will grab everything they can possibly get because you're dead and you're gone. Nothing matters anymore. So who knows if the universe has some embedded purpose or meaning, or if we individually have purpose or meaning. I don't know. But I think that having the sense that I do, and that civilization does, it would mean that we would treat ourselves, our neighbors, and our planet quite differently than we have been doing so. So that's part of my interest as well. So the science is very interesting. Pushing the envelope is something I like. And it also has meaning in the sense that if it turns out that some of these ideas, these leading edge ideas, turn out to be true, it could well change the scientific paradigm in a way that would be beneficial for everyone. So the other part of this is you look at what happens for people who've had a transformational experience in consciousness, either through a mystical experience or psychedelic experience or whatever. Almost always it turns out to be prosocial. They transform into a better person. Well, that's really important, because now that their previous concept of who and what they are has been expanded, they become better. So that's a kind of confirmation that if our philosophy is wrong, our ideology of who and what we think we are is wrong or constrained, that's no good, because we know what happens on the other side. So that's yet another reason for really pushing hard to say, well, we're not going to a priori say this is the way it is, like from a religious perspective, but say, okay, at the leading edge of science now, there's some really, really interesting things that are kind of pointing in that direction. So let's go there.
The guests can contribute also a question to the pool. So if you want to ask a question and then sometimes answer it yourself, if you want to do that.
I would ask a similar question I've heard many times before, which are at the leading edge now, which is, do we think that AI is going to become conscious, have something like the same sort of consciousness that humans have?
And
well, so if panpsychism is true, then the answer is probably yes at some point, because it'll develop the similar amount of complexity as the human brain to be able to sustain consciousness, because panpsychism says everything is ultimately conscious anyway.
That's the easy way.
Yeah. So that would mean that in science fiction, where we see robots with positronic brains, whatever that is, that they're conscious like humans. Well, okay, yeah, they have subjective experience. If panpsychism turned out to not be such a viable explanation, it might still be true, because maybe idealism is correct, in which case everything also comes from consciousness, including a robot. So I think it is likely that at some point we will get something like a Turing test that will not be able to make the distinction anymore between human consciousness and a robot consciousness. Maybe if a robot could demonstrate being psychic, being like telepathic, like purely subjective, maybe that would do it. So we've been in discussions with a branch in Google DeepMind, which is interested in that very topic. Like, could we do some sort of psychic experiment with an advanced AI, which would require something psychic in it as a way of testing? So that's, yeah. So I think that's a very interesting question. And because AI is advancing so fast now, and I'm finding it very useful in my own work, not only writing, but in developing ideas, like a brainstorming thing, that I can imagine now when something reaches superintelligence, that science could take off in an exponential curve if used well. And at some point, we might have to seriously start thinking about, what are these things? There are these, our next phase of evolution, or what's going on here?
Predict when the real conversation starts. Usually it's right when you normally end, so we don't end there anymore. Deep dive episodes run 90 minutes, sometimes more. We follow where the thinking actually goes. I'm Thomas Emel, and this is Entangled Health. For everyone who finds the uncertainty more interesting than the answers. Let's entangle.